without further ado, introduce you to Jeff Wolovitz. Is that who you say?
Yep. So I'm Jeff from Heiwa Tofu. I started Heiwa Tofu over 9 years ago now. And we've made over 500,000 pounds of tofu in that time period, made and sold it. And I've learned a lot in the time since, and it's always something new to do, something new challenge to face. I'm a little curious about the group here, and Tom, and what their sort of interests are coming into the class and/or backgrounds. Is there a Can you speak to it all, and then we can see if any of the other students have anything to add to it?
Yeah. Well, this class is designed to satisfy the L requirement. So that's all students at Colby have to take a lab science. They have to take a non-lab and a lab science, and this satisfies a lab science. So there's a lecture and a lab associated with it. There are a couple science students. You are one. But the bulk of the students in the class are non-science majors, so we have them from all over the school, and all classes that we have freshmen and seniors here. So it's about as diverse a group as you're going to get on Colby students in terms of interests and backgrounds.
Yep.
And there's the topic is biochemistry of foods. So I don't know. It is the first year I've taught it, and up until this point, I wanted to cover more material than I had, but I probably dawdled in the beginning of the semester. I've talked about macronutrients, so carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, in probably more grisly detail than they wanted. And we've been talking about Popeye and the Sailor Man and micronutrients for the last week or so. Using Popeye and spinach as a way to talk about vitamins and minerals.
Okay.
And then the lab itself has, I don't know, it's been a mixed bag of different, pretty easy, sometimes difficult lab. Sometimes in the kitchen, we do get to go to the experimental kitchen sometimes.
I saw you guys fermented a lot of stuff this year. Yeah.
Yeah.
I saw on the sheet you sent me.
Oh, yeah.
You sent the syllabus, or?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's right. So, I don't know. You guys tell me about it.
Yeah.
What did we make? What was your favorite fermented food?
We made kombucha. That was really fun. We each got a little piece of a SCOBY, and then we fermented our own from tea, and we did like a double ferment.
Nice.
Flavored it with ginger, some buds.
Good. Cool. You look like you're about to speak to one now.
We also made sauerkraut.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah, we were the first time I let them. I didn't give them very clear instructions, sort of on purpose, because I wanted them to experiment and see what worked, and most of it kind of crashed, which was okay. That was trying to get them to embrace the experimental.
Yeah. So, business students? Much business at Colby? Econ, similar. Arts? What else am I missing? Science?
There's business and finance, there's arts, he's environmental studies policy, some are undeclared, humanities.
And why did people sign up for this class, in particular, as a lab?
Is that of interest? Is that of interest for the subject?
Yeah. Food related?
Yeah.
Everybody likes food? Yeah, cool. All right. I brought a couple things to pass around. This is what we do. We make these, lots of these. There's crud on it from my bag. I started for the first almost 5 years of the business. We would make tofu. Comes out in big blocks, 25-pound blocks of tofu. And those would go, we'd chill them, cut them up, and pack them into buckets. And after we heated it, so that you need to cook beans before you eat them, so there's a cooking step. That's also our kill step. where we're killing any bacteria. So where you did a lot with fermented foods, with tofu, it's not fermented at all, and we want it actually, I want to have as little bacteria in there as possible so I can maximize my shelf life. It's almost like seafood where it's going to rot, spoil, but not in a good way like your or in a delicious way like your sauerkraut might be, but in more of a foul way like seafood or meat or anything, because it's a high protein food. So I want to keep any bacteria out as much as possible. You can see from the photo there, this is mid-production, but it's pretty clean in there. We keep it real clean. At the end of the day, everything's spotless. It takes a lot of time to do that. So I'll back up. So the first 5 years, we'd make the tofu, cook it, and you can see, got a pointer? Okay, that's fine. So you can see in the middle there's a kettle there. That's sort of near the beginning of the processing, on the sort of in that corner. So that's my kill step, where I kill any bacteria that came in with the product, with the soybeans. So after that, there's a whole bunch of other steps that would happen before we get it cold and cool it. And in those, there's with food, as soon as you handle it at all, no matter what your sanitation protocol is, no matter how clean you are, you're going to introduce bacteria. And we can't get to surgical standards. We're even there. I mean, I guess I don't know too much about medicine, but they're probably pretty aseptic in those environments. We try, but we can't really get there. So we're not sterilizing, we're sanitizing. Do you guys ever talk about the difference between sanitizing and sterilizing?
Yeah, that was on my list when I got to food.
Yeah.
Processing.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I haven't.
So sterilizing, you're killing like 99.99999, I don't know how many significant figures they go on for, of the bacteria. That's surgical. And also sort of aseptic packaging can be like that as well. Sanitizing, you're getting like 99.99% or one more or something like that, as well as trying to really get down any pathogens. Spoilage microorganisms are the tough ones. So we'll keep backing up again to where I originally started in our history.
Yeah. Can I ask you,
yeah.
if it occurred, maybe you'll talk about it, but what if you were not able to fully, or someone else was not able to fully sanitize, what are the kind of bacterial strains that soybeans are particularly susceptible to?
Pathogens, I'm not too familiar with.
Bacteria.
Aerobic lactic acid forming bacteria that they're basically prevalent everywhere. They make things go sour, right? So that's a lot of what the spoilage bacteria out there is my understanding. I don't come from a bio background, so also learn as I go, and it's sort of a lot of it's on a need-to-know basis. I think a lot of it's lactic acid forming bacteria, aerobic stuff. Does that sound like a right answer? Sure. Good answer? A legitimate answer? I don't know about right, but legitimate?
Yeah.
So we would take the tofu, make it, and then it would be, there's a bunch of steps after that cook step where you actually turn it into tofu. And I'll keep backing up again. I should go through what the tofu 101, what it is. But anyway, we would cut up the tofu, pack it into buckets, fill it with water, and ship it out. And there was a lot of handling after it was cooked. So we had a real short shelf life on that. And ultimately, it limited how much I could grow. So about 3 years in, the first few years, my sales grew. And then we kind of reached a plateau where we nailed our niche, filled it, and I tried harder, as hard as I could, to sell more tofu and grow the business more. But I couldn't. For 3 years, it was flat. So ultimately, what we did to get to this was we cut it, we vacuum seal it, and then we heat treat it. So it goes into a hot water bath. And that kills off any bacteria once it's in this closed environment, or at least knocks any down from growing. And then once it's refrigerated, they won't grow, maybe from their spore state or something like that. So in the 3-4 years since we started doing this, the business has close to tripled in our sales in 3 years. So I'll pass this around. Actually, I brought something we can open it up to. I brought a bag to put it in so you can kind of get a more feel of the texture of it. So tofu making starts with soybeans. I brought a sample. I dry roasted these. Am I supposed to stay in front of? I see the screen there.
No,
not too much. We start with dry soybeans. I brought some. I dry roasted these last night on my on a skillet in my kitchen, so you can eat one if you want. They're a little hard. These were grown. I think these were Maine grown. They were in my kitchen that I brought home from the tofu shop at one point. But you can take it and pass it around too. I think these were grown in Maine. They're organic, non-GMO. Which, if it's organic, it also implies that they're not GMO. Though if you see like a non-GMO verified thing, that typically there's higher levels of testing on those, particularly for soy. But
That are explicitly stated.
yeah. So with organic, you have to go through steps that show that you made sure it's not GMO, but there's no actual testing. So it's a little more trust between the inspector and the grower and the processor. And there's audit trails, record keeping, and all that. But
Is that the case with like larger industry?
with what?
Larger industries, like big companies?
I think so. So with organic, with the grower, if they're growing soy or anything else, they want to make sure that there's distance between neighboring fields that have GMO crops to make sure there's no drift. Okay, but that comes down to your plan and saying yes, there are none nearby, or there were last year but not this year. So that's a possibility. Like they come maybe last. So that's sort of on organic often how they confirm it. Whereas if you see, for instance, non-GMO verified on a soy product, they probably got to test that because there's so much GMO soy out there. Same for corn. It's a high risk product, so they're actually going to want to see testing to ensure that there's no GMO genes in there.
So in soybean, can I ask you this? It's okay if you don't know. In terms of GMO, is it that they're Roundup ready, or what's the typical?
I think so, where they can go ahead and kill any weeds there before they plant, and then probably when they go to harvest, if there is weeds, they might do it, spray it again. That's maybe more with wheat that they do that. But yeah, I think they're Roundup ready soybeans.
So the beans you get, you said were from Maine?
We source from throughout New England. There's a few growers in Maine. There's one in Hadley, Mass, which is I think sort of north central Mass. Somebody in Essex, New York, which is on Lake Champlain, pretty close to Vermont. This past year, we grew a lot, and my supply chain didn't keep up, so I ended up bringing in some soybeans from Canada, eastern Canada. Yeah.
How many soybeans do you use?
Yep. So in a day right now, again, we've grown and we've expanded what we can do in a day. We go through about 500 pounds of dry soybeans in a day, and they're dry. So when we make tofu, we add water, so we end up from 500 pounds of dry soybeans, I'll get about 1,200, 1,300 pounds of tofu from it, which is kind of
That's
nice.
husk. They've been taken in the shell.
They look like what I passed around, yep, except not roasted, not toasted. I think I have some photos of some dry ones.
Got a lot of protein.
It's very high in protein. There we go. Whoa, what's going on? So here's a bag of dry. These are some of the Canadian ones. I'm just going to leave it like this. Probably easier that way. So those come in a, if I scroll up one, you can see how they come to us. Those sacks are 2,000 pound bags of soybeans, the white bags. So we can go through one of those in about a week and a half. So tofu 101, right? So we start with dry soybeans. They get soaked overnight. They double in volume approximately from the water. Then they get ground up into a paste that sort of looks like hummus. It's ground up beans. Then that gets cooked with water, so about equal parts water and that slurry for a bit. Bring it up to a boil pretty much. That's a kill step, but it's also a cooking step, and it helps with the extraction of the protein. Because when I want to make a soy milk, tofu is like cheese made from soy milk. So after I cook the slurry, we pump it through and squeeze out all the liquid in a press to get soy milk, and then it gets curdled. I use calcium sulfate. It's a mineral that's mined in the Midwest. It's gypsum, food and pharmaceutical grade gypsum. It's what they make sheetrock out of. Not the food and pharmaceutical grade for sheetrock, but it's also in any calcium-enriched foods. That's what they'll use. So if you take a calcium supplement, most likely it's calcium sulfate. There's like calcium propionate, I think it's used in baking. I'm not sure if that comes from calcium sulfate or not, actually. So it gets curdled. Then the curds get, after about 10-15 minutes of adding the calcium sulfate, it looks like yogurt. Then the curds get broken up. It gets broken up into curds and whey. The whey gets strained off, and the curds get pressed into boxes. So I'll back up and just show you some of those steps so we are not having a button here.
So you add calcium sulfate
that's what dehaters the protein. Does that change the pH? What changes the pH? Do you ever monitor your pH?
No,
No.
no. But the whey destroys my concrete floors.
Have you tasted the stuff at each of these steps? How does the taste differ between each of the steps?
I don't know. Couldn't say. So there's the soybeans in the hopper of my grinder there. Yeah, a little bit of water to help it go through. One batch of soybeans for me is we take about 30 pounds of dry soybeans. Actually, I'll go to this photo. I didn't put these. I just grabbed these photos this morning. So there you can see those 3 white buckets there. Sorry, to the left of that, this is called the Doe Trough. I got it. I think it was a used piece of equipment. Maybe came from Pepperidge Farms, and they made a lot of dough in it. It's 10 feet long, so it stretches from about me to this gentleman over here, and about this wide. And we soak the soybeans in there. So they get weighed out into those white buckets. They have holes in the bottom, small holes, smaller than the soybeans, but quarter inch, eighth of an inch, and then holes in the lids because the soybeans might float. We put the buckets in the dough trough, fill it up with water, and they soak overnight. I have to be careful how long to soak. Like in the summer, if I soak for a very long time, I'll see bubbles starting to form on the surface, and that's probably some fermentation starting to happen. I think maybe alcohol fermentation. I'm not quite sure what it is, some type of aerobic fermentation. I see a loss of my total tofu at the end of the day. If I don't soak for long enough, then we don't get enough hydration and it's harder to extract protein. So 12 hours, in the summer, 12. Maybe I try to cut it down to 10. In the wintertime, I might do as many as 16 to 18 hours, but also it's a 6-hour production run. So, I try to hit the middle of it. It's a little bit of art there. This also has to do with production. At the end of the day, there's only so early that they can soak because they're still in cleanup. So there's all sorts of really things to balance and judge on how we're going to do it.
The whole process, you said, is 6 hours?
Our production run runs about 6 hours. I'll answer that a little more.
How much tofu can you get at the end of 6 hours?
Well, from the start of the grind to the end of the grinding, we do batches. It takes about 6 hours. But then there's still lots more behind it.
So that's only 1 piece.
Yeah, we run about a 12-hour day with cleanup and setup. We can make 12 to 1,300 pounds of tofu. So we fill the dough trough there with water, soak the beans overnight. 3 buckets there makes 1 batch of soybeans. 1 batch of tofu, about 10 pounds in a bucket, and then when it fills up, it doubles in volume and basically fills the bucket. We can do 18 batches in a day right now. Every 20 minutes, I start a new batch is how it works. You can you see my mouse? Yeah, there you go. As you can see back here, let me see if I have any better photos of it. My kettle where we cook. Yeah, here we go. This is an old photo. This is a propane-fired kettle right here. We recently upgraded and put a steam boiler in, which is on the other side of this wall. And then I have direct steam kettles, which basically, so the combustion's out of the production room, which has been great for us. And now there's 2 kettles here. We go twice as fast with 2 kettles. So the way it works, right here's the grinder. You can see that piece. That takes about 20 minutes. I can do it from over here too, can't I? Takes about 20 minutes to grind the soybeans. So there's a slurry pot down here. I don't know if I have any better photos of it, but we hoist it up, dump it into the water, cook it for 25 minutes, pump it around. And this is the press where we squeeze all the liquid back out into these curdling barrels down there is what I call them. I like to preheat the water first before I dump the slurry in because that slurry doesn't conduct heat as well as water. Water is such a good conductor of heat. So we can heat quickly, bring the water up to a boil in 5+ minutes, dump the slurry in and cook it. The slurry sort of forms a skin around the side of the kettle because it's hot. It doesn't quite scorch it, but it cooks on. So I scrape that off every time, but that also slows down the cooking. So what we do right now with the 2 kettles is basically I start 1 kettle at time equals 0. I dump the slurry in, and then we lower it down real quick and start grinding again. And as soon as that's finished, the second kettle, which is right next to the one here, the water's just coming to a boil, and we dump the slurry into there. 5 minutes later, the first kettle finishes cooking, pump it around, squeeze it out, start filling that, and By the time we get up to time of 40, start the third batch, and you just hop back and forth. Every 20 minutes, we're dumping slurry in one kettle or the other, and every 20 minutes, we're pumping it out. And everything happens every 20 minutes. This batch of tofu basically moves to the next position on the production line. So this is one person's job, is to operate 2 kettles, the grinder and the beans. When we ran 1 kettle, I ran this plus the other side of the line, which I'll show you. Let's see what other photos I got here. Next photo, this is, I think, a similar photo. Yeah, you can see a little more. There's my 2 curdling barrels on the right that I'm hanging out by. It's pretty messy. We get pretty wet, so I wear the bib overalls, kind of like a fisherman. It's bibs, but we smell better usually. Press. This is my old production facility. You can see the red floor is a little bit different. There's a good view of the press, though. So this is after the kettle. My old production went right to left. Now I go left to right, which wasn't a hard change as much as I thought. That's a fabric sack that's tied onto the end of this pipe. There's a pump down on the floor. So it goes from the kettle down on the floor, up, and into this fabric sack. This has a perforated metal sheet in the bottom with bars underneath it. Similar to a cider press, perhaps, though they wouldn't have that perforated sheet. They just have the bars in the sack. So that fills all the way up. This gets lowered, this plate. I have another photo that shows that. And when we squeeze all the liquid out, I saw another photo in here that...
Hydraulic?
Yeah. There it is there. It's a little small. Maybe I can zoom it. Right here. So now it's squeezed. That plate came down. Here's a hydraulic cylinder right here that's pushing up on this. I had an old press that had the cylinder up over top, which is sort of a food safety hazard. If you leak hydraulic cylinder, it gets in the food. I've had to get food grade oil, and then this thing, it's painted. If it was up there, it would get real dirty, so we moved it off to the side and did this style press. There's other ways to do this extraction. Extracting is tough. It's really hard to separate solids from liquids. It's so hard, especially when the solids are real small. Like we're down this size, microns is the diameter. When I grind it up, it gets pushed through a screen when we grind it like a, do you guys know what a microplane is? It's like what a zester almost. It's just real small holes with a little piece of metal that's raised up. So it's really hard. This is the most challenging part of my day at times, is getting this separation. If we can't get this squeezed, I lose a lot of soy milk and my yield drops for the day. We get less tofu at the end of the day. Soy milk goes down in here. There's another straining sack here just to get the small particles out.
I mean, when was tofu first made? Do they estimate?
I think we're looking a couple thousand.
Yeah.
It was different then, right?
Huh?
It was different then.
Yeah. Has tofu changed the quality of the tofu, the character of the tofu? I mean, obviously you haven't had 2,000 tofu.
Right? No. Well, we can make a lot more in a day now. One person, or we're a crew of 5, but still, probably went a lot more slowly without electricity and motors and stuff. Right? You're grinding it with stones. You're heating it with wood, not 15 pounds of steam, which is, running at 240, 300 degrees. Though maybe with wood you could get it heated quickly.
Have you been to?
No hydraulics. That you could use a lever, mechanical advantage, but also probably slower.
Yeah. Have you been to East Asia to see any of the ways that it was made traditionally?
Yeah, no. Before I started making tofu, I was in Japan, as it was still like in here. It was happening when we kind of peeked into a tofu plant from one of the doors. But
in industrials, yeah.
Yeah. No, I've never been to a small scale factory or manufacturer. What do you want to call it? A kitchen?
Yeah, it's just interesting to me how it's like changed with all
Yeah.
this technology. You're still facing these challenges.
Right. I think the process is still pretty similar. Right. I mean, we're grinding up the beans, we're cooking it. There's nothing real fancy going on here. All this machinery is helping make it, I guess, easier. I have more knowledge about sanitation, and but at the same time, probably whatever you made then was eaten that day, so there wasn't quite the concerns of spoilage. no refrigeration, but it's a simple process. It's not tricky. For the curdling step, calcium sulfate is a little bit of a newer chemical that's used to do it. That started, the history goes there in during World War II, so in the 1940s. They used to use, traditionally magnesium chloride was used to denature the proteins. That comes from salt water. So the process there is kind of cool. You make your sea salt, okay, how you want to do that, and then you moisten it, and then let that drip. And those drippings, you make salt out of that. And I guess the magnesium chloride comes out more easily than the sodium and the other ones. So magnesium chloride was originally used to make tofu. In World War II, they needed the magnesium for ammunition, gunpowder, I guess. So they had to come up with another way to do it. So calcium sulfate became a popular way to curdle tofu. And it's a lot easier to use than magnesium chloride. I tried using some early on. I bought some and made some really bad tofu and was just like, I don't have time for this right now. I'd love to get back to it.
What do you mean by bad?
It was, so magnesium chloride is also called bittern, I think, and it's very bitter. So I made some really bitter tofu, and it was really like hard and dry. And I'd actually like to do it. But it's more challenging to make. It's more challenging to make. I'd like to have like a combination of calcium sulfate for the ease of use, and then the magnesium chloride to bring some magnesium into the product. I think it's harder to get magnesium in our bodies almost than calcium. It's important to have a good ratio of magnesium and calcium. So I think it'd make it more nutritive to have magnesium in there. So there's some soy milk after I curdled it. So I added the calcium sulfate already, and that's about 10 minutes in or so. Give it 10 to 15 minutes. Take that big spoon and break it up. Just kind of, I try to like invert it. A cheesemaker cuts the curds into cubes somehow. I've tried doing that, didn't work. I almost try to flip it so as it comes up, the curds, they just kind of fall and crumble apart in a way. It looks like scrambled eggs. I keep standing in front of you. Sort of looks like scrambled eggs. They're really delicious like that. In Japan, they call that oboro tofu, and anytime I've had a Japanese, my in-laws are Japanese, when they come in, or my kids, I get people who have been around some of the Asian cultures. They're like, they're so excited to try some of that. It's real nice and custardy, soft, warm, kind of like really good steam table scrambled eggs. So I lay the piece of metal with the liquid in it. That's a colander. So that just sits in there, and the whey sort of gathers into it. And then that bowl floating there, I use that to scoop out the whey. So I scoop out a bunch of whey, and then where's the photo of pressing boxes there? Those are the pressing boxes. So I scoop the curds into the pressing boxes that are lined with cheesecloth, fold the cheesecloth over, and you can see these are what we call platens here. This is a pneumatic, so air cylinders are up in this metal box. Squeeze down on the big blocks of tofu and push the curds into blocks. And there's the other photo I'll scroll over to. So each of those is about 25 pounds. There's the press. Doesn't have the platens on it, but you can see those rods there. So squeeze it down, the cylinder comes down and squeezes the blocks of tofu. Squeeze for about 25 minutes and 20 minutes. Everything's 20. Nothing can go for more than 20 minutes, or else there's more product coming along. I do have 2 curdling barrels, so that gives me 40 minutes to do that one step of the squeezing. Actually is the hardest one. That's when I'm just up against the gun to get it done in 20 minutes to get it squeezed well. I do have 2 barrels to collect the soy milk, so I actually have 40 minutes for those. Just like the 2 kettles, I have 40 minutes for each of those to take the whole product.
Must be a couple minutes staggered though, right? So that you can start one process and then the other is ending just as you're done.
So the grind takes like 18 and a half minutes. So you basically have like a minute and a half to try to like get that slurry pot over, hoist it up, dump it in, get it back down, push it out, turn the grinder on, and dump the next soybeans in. We actually tend to run 21 minutes is what we've been doing. We can average that. So over the course of 18 batches, basically 20 minutes would be 3 batches an hour. I watch the clock constantly, and we have timers going, but I watch the clock, and I know if I start my first batch at like 20 after, my 18th batch would be at the top of the hour, whatever hour that is, 6 hours later, but it actually tends to be right around 20 after. So we pretty much lose 20 minutes over the course of those 6 hours, 18 batches, which is about 21 minutes a batch.
But it takes you 20 minutes to do each of the steps in the production line.
To complete it and get it back to ready to for the next one. Yeah. Right? So I press for 18 minutes because it takes us 2 minutes to unload them, the tofu out of the pressing boxes, get them back on the table, and stretch the cheesecloth over.
Say how many bodies?
Yeah, so right now, there's a good photo of that. Let me find that one. Top, that must be down near the bottom. There it is. Yeah, so this is a little layout. This is right by the entranceway to the room. That corner is the kettle. There's the edge of the dough trough. And the 2 kettles are over here. Press, curdling area, 3-station tofu press. This is our cut and pack area. Over here on this wall, this is basically the corner. It's just another, like, it's right about there is the corner, and then it comes back to the entranceway. That's where we have our hot water bath. It's a 6-burner stove with a big trough on top of it where we do the pasteurizing. So we got 1 person on the kettles and the grinder. Right now, me on the operating the press, so this person helps me with that a little bit. Curdling, getting the tofu into the pressing boxes. Here's somebody doing the cutting and packing, where they cut it and load it into the bags that you saw. This is the vacuum sealer. There's 1 person that operates the vacuum sealer, loads them in there, loads them out, puts them into, see these dish racks here? They're being used as a table right there, but that's where we load the racks. We can get 20 blocks in a rack, and then we can fit in our pasteurizer, we can get 8 racks in there, 2 stacks of 4. So we can basically 1 batch worth of tofu is like 3.5 racks. So those go in the hot water bath. So 1 person is basically operating the sealer, the pasteurizer. From the pasteurizer, they go into just like there's a 2-bay sink right here that's pre-chill tap water to start to bring the temperature down, because we got to cool this stuff down, get it under 40 degrees. And this is a milk tank from a farm. Okay, it's a jacketed tank we use to keep milk cold before the truck comes to pick it up. So it goes from the cows to the tank. It has refrigerant lines coming in, and the jacket cools the milk down under 40 degrees. We fill it with water. We cool the water down to 34 degrees, put the tofu in there to chill down below 40. FDA, their best manufacturing practices are you need to get it under 70 degrees within 2 hours and under 40 degrees within another 4 hours. It's something like that. It might have changed a bit since, but that's what you're basically shooting for to keep bacteria from growing, because they have a little lag time after they get cooked, and they're like, whoa, there might still be some in there. They might have formed some spores. It takes a while till those spores hatch out and they start doing stuff. I think it's called a lag time. So it takes a little while till they start getting active. So they give you that 4 hours to get it beneath 40 degrees, at which point those spores won't really grow very quickly. Lag time's probably longer than that. They put in a large safety factor there. So there's the milk tank. So 1 person basically handles from there, getting the stuff down into the milk tank and then out to the walk-in cooler. This person helps here a little bit, like if this is Cole right there. If he's busy with doing stuff over here, Matt might, if this little table gets full, he might start doing some loading there. But it's all pretty tight. There's a lot of communications. 1, 2, 3, 4 people. I get there at 6 a.m. I used to start at 5, but I got tired of getting up at 4, 3 or 4 days a week, so I pushed it back an hour. When we switched, we used to just run 2 kettles in October. Beginning of October, we switched to running 2 kettles and increased how much we can make in a day. So when we did that, I switched it an hour later. I get in at 6. I start operating the 2 kettles. At about 6:45, I'm starting to have more to do over here. So somebody comes in to take over this job for me here. At 7:15, the first tofu blocks are coming off the press, and this guy shows up to start cutting them. He can do this for a little bit on his own, and then by 8, the first blocks are ready to go into the rack, so this person comes in and takes over there. At 10:30, somebody else comes in. They start weighing out beans for the next day, washing the empty buckets, filling them up with soybeans, and by noon, even before that, the dough trough is empty, and that person starts cleaning the dough trough. Before that, might give some of these people a break and take over for them. Go take your break. You've been working for 5 hours or 4 hours, 3 hours, whatever. Take a break. And as soon as the dough trough is empty, we start cleaning it because we got a lot of cleanup to do. As soon as the grinder's done operating, that gets broken down and we're starting to clean that. So as product kind of finishes up behind the line, we're trying to clean right behind it and keep up because we're there cleaning until 5, usually, or cleaning and setting up. This person on the kettle leaves around 2 o'clock. They do some cleanup. I'm done around 1. I head out, start doing administrative work. This guy's running until about 2:30. He's finished all the vacuum sealing. He does a little bit of cleanup. He leaves around 3:30. This person and the person that came in at 10:30, they're there until about 5 o'clock. Cleaning, setting up for the next day. How are we doing on time?
Yeah, we gotta let them go.
I forgot about the time.
Yes, all right.
That's Tofu 101. It's kind of fun. It's always challenging. There's always stuff. That's just the process side. There's the whole business side of it and the manufacturing.
Yeah.
So we're a food manufacturer. We're manufacturing artisan food, but we're still manufacturing, and manufacturing is fun.
It's really cool, man. I have to tell you, I came in contact with your tofu.
Handouts.
I got you a little gift and a card. This is for you.
Thank
very
you.
much for your time.
Oh yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
I'm going over the dining halls to do. Oh guys, I'll be at the dining hall at Dana today doing a tasting. If you want to come, I have some magazine articles I brought. If you want to chat a little more, I'll be there during lunch today.
Cool.